Hello everyone. Today I will be presenting on the topic The West and the Rest, which is a piece of writing by Stuart Hall in his book called The Formations of Modernity. This book highlights things like characteristics of modern societies, the birth of social sciences in the Enlightenment period, and the emerging identity of the West and its encounters with other civilizations. Now, when we hear the words the West and the Rest, we often think that a certain group of people are regarded as the rest, while the people living in the more urbanized and capitalized societies are regarded as the West. But it's not a geographical construct. It's a rather a historical construct. That in history, the West is not necessarily the people living in the Western Hemisphere. It's rather an anthropological idea about how societies regarded as developed, urbanized, industrialized, secular, or modern in the today's world rose in the 16th century. So this makes this whole concept as a historical construct. The discourse of the West and the Rest as a system of representation works like the world is divided into a simple dichotomy of like a dichotomy of two identities. The words West and Rest are simply oversimplified versions of like two differentiated cultures in the world. These differentiated cultures are then used as a standard of model to compare the two identities of the world. It simply asserts that the entire West is unified in it by the sense that they are different from the rest of the world. It's closely associated with radical fantasies of whiteness. In history, the rest is recognized as uh, like a, like a mirror image of the West. The entire West is like unified in a sense that they are different from the people living in the rest, uh, from the people that live in the other side of the world. So throughout history, people have tried to like differentiate themselves with the people living on the other side of the world, the people from the rest. This idea lies within the roots of the formations of modernity. It also gave rise to the concept of Orientalism, which fantasized and distorted European perception about the Eastern people. Uh, as I talked about it earlier, the discourse of the West and the rest means that the world is divided into two differentiated halves. So the West views the rest from a stereotypical lens, where it is defined as everything which the West is not. The idea of Western superiority and Oriental inferiority originated from the convention of the West being modern and the rest being traditional. In his groundbreaking 1978 text, Orientalism, a Palestinian intellectual and literary theorist, Edward Said, argued that the dominant European political ideology created the notion of the Orient in order to subjugate and control it. He, he primarily referred to the Middle East that being Orientalized in the European narrative. But as we move along, the Orient was never able to represent itself in a more general way. According to Edward Said, colonialism did not work through armies, conquest, and oppression. It worked through literature and was justified with narrative. Throughout history, Western narrative has tried to learn more about the Eastern culture, and this curiosity they had to learn more about the people in the rest. It often made certain assumptions to present a fulfilling narrative. Orientalism is simply like a way of seeing that imagines, emphasizes, exaggerates, and distorts differences of certain cultures as compared to that of the West. Uh, it's generally a concept that unilaterally determine what can be said about their culture, as various discourses in the West produced and constructed the Orient, or also known as the Rest, as an object of knowledge. The West essentially painted a picture of the cultures in the West and captured them in a stereotypical lens. Some modern day examples of Orientalism is widely known as Arabs being regarded as terrorists and misogynists, and Africans as starving victims, Mexicans as drug lords, corrupt leaders, and Asians as software engineers, religious fanatics by the Western media. Um, Other examples also include Africans who are identified as dark-skinned to the Arabs who are displayed as terrorists. The Western literature and media portray these cultures from an Orientalist perspective. The differences of the Eastern and Western cultures are exaggerated, emphasized, and distorted. A Muslim is identified as misogynist. So, how did the West develop this particular mentality and perception? So, um, there was a family of ideas that provided the Orientals with this mentality about the rest having regular characteristics. Uh, European explorers, classical poets, myths, travelers' tales, these are only some of the few sources and examples that formed an archive of knowledge about the rest. Uh, like Plato in 347 BC described the rest as a string of legendary islands, um, like uh, described as paradise, which encouraged many explorers to set out and explore the world. The classical poets such as Horace and Ovid also described the rest as an eternal paradise, a place of perfect happiness and a springtime of human beings. Prior to the emergence of modern Orientalism, in the age of exploration, before the 15th century, European explorer Henry the Navigator sailed to the Atlantic Ocean and discovered Madeira Islands in 1419 and the Azores in 1427. Other Western explorers were also optimistic to discover trade routes that would connect them to the land unbeknownst to them. They expected their destination to be filled with their fantasized ideas and mythological beliefs. The people in India were even believed to have dog heads. Sexual fantasies of European explorers made them imagine the culture in the rest to be more erotic and cruder. The West also believed that the rest contained heavenly rivers, people with goat's feet, people who lived under over 400 years, and many other supernatural ideologies were respected, like trees that were so high that they reached the clouds, the people so tall that they were like giants. And another example is that the Portuguese believed that a Christian king named Preston John had a great power in the subcontinent. So, and he would help them in war, along with their Christian allies in India. So they essentially thought that India has Christianity. So they didn't knew the actual facts. They actually assumed what would be there according to the myths and the books they were told about in the scripts. Uh, like Bible was also one of the sources that they believed in. So it was only later when Vasco da Gama's arrival to India encouraged more Western explorers to visit India that led them to find out about the Indians with their tawny skin, following a religion with practices different from Christianity. This was an empirical realization of India and its inhabitants. I talked about modern Orientalism, like it was like such um, developing such stereotypes that have become norm of the modern society and the tool of the West's representation of the rest. Uh, but in the past, in history, the inhabitant of the rest was an irrational barbaric, defined as them, while the people in the West were identified as the rational and civilized, defined as us in the Western narrative. The rest was recognized as too lazy and not fit to govern themselves. Invasion of the West was defined as salvation for the rest. Edward Said thought that either the West did not recognize the stereotyping due to some failings, or it believed its own culture was superior. The nexus of power and knowledge led the West to misinterpret and generalize the subcontinent as a whole. Mm, So idealization, the protection of the perception of fantasies of desire, the failure to recognize the difference, and the tendencies to impose European norms and cultures were were all some of the reasons that led to the Western stereotyping the rest. Now stereotyping is like rather an exaggerated simplification of one culture, as if different characteristics are run together and condensed into one. Like these characteristics then become the signs, the evidence by which the characteristics was known from. The whole place is then known. The whole place is then popular by that particular characteristics. This is very similar to Orientalism. Now, stereotyping also led to led to the concept known as dualism. Uh, it's also known as splitting of these, like splitting these stereotypes into two halves, the good and the bad. As some stereotypes describe the place as very attractive, like paradise, while some stereotypes describe the place as barbarous. Um, and other examples are friendly and unfriendly, or noble or ignoble. Now, people from the West and the explorer in the West specifically were determined and curious to see the strange land that was described in poems and books and tales. Some thought that the rest was an attractive paradise with saints and extraordinary creatures. But there were also some people who perceived the rest as a land which had violent and barbarous humans who were cruel and savages, as they were believed to have no form of education or civilization. However, some modern authors, such as Moorhead, describe that there were people with no vice, prejudice, or hatred, or needs or dissension. They had no materialistic desires. They knew no God but love. Many explorers describe this crude and erotic part of the world as a dream world. The people lived according to what nature had intended, naked and unashamed. It was untroubled by the European guilt, and education, civilization had not corrupted them, and this symbolizes the term noble savage. This term was originated in the 17th century. Rousseau was another famous literary theorist, believed that people in the state of nature were innocent and at their best, and regarded civilization as a civilization and culture that civilization and culture was an unnatural concept. Uh, but but several modern authors saw the process of education as a part of human development. The natural human is born with wild dispositions that lives in a disorganized manner and is rather primitive, traditional, and barbaric. Then education was seen as a form of culture that helped the humans understand and manipulate nature, manipulate their own identity so they could differentiate themselves with other species. And now, uh, first, Europeans believed that all mankind, all of humanity, were the sons and daughters of Adam and Eve, like they originated from the same God. But however, in 1492, after Christopher Columbus's arrival to America, the West discovered people in Africa and America without any social organizations that appeared to be savages. It was then later questioned that whether these idol worshipper savages should be regarded as the brothers and sisters that originated from the same God. Their way of life and lack of civilization made the West question their very humanity. The the differentiated cultural and religious beliefs led the West to regard the rest as a deviant and strange. This was the beginning of modern Orientalism and the Age of Enlightenment, where the people started to get to know the people in the West. Then people in the West question if the people in the West are not uh, if the people in the West are not civilized, does it mean that they are low on the scale of humanity? This debate raged for most of the 15th century. Now in the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution and Enlightenment pushed Western societies away from feudalism and absolute monarchies and pushed it towards civilization. The West gained power, weapons, modernization, and economic stability, which made it think itself as a superior and civilized identity. In 1494, the Treaty of Tordesillas divided the lands of America to Portugal and Spain. This led to the foundation of the concept of colonization, when European empires expanded their regime through colonies and increased the land under their control. In the age of imperialism, the West started to gain advancement in military, economy, and politics, which gave rise to the idea of progress and development. Now, they colonized throughout the world and provided the rationalization and justification for the need of Western intervention to tame, civilize, and rescue the savages that they recently discovered. But as they discovered the world hegemony and justified the genocide with civilization. The rest was defined as barbaric, uncivilized, and depraved inhabitants who ate other people and had no proper economic or social systems. These perceptions made the West discover, conquest, and settle in the subcontinent, which was uncivilized. The West wanted the rest to discard their faith in religion and culture and follow the ideologies of Europe. The concept of Orientalism embodied the distinction between the Orient and the Occident, so the West could essentially authorize and control the views of the rest. Now, the West soon became a prototype and rather a model to treasure social progress. Max Weber, one of sociology's founding fathers, used a dualistic model of comparison which contrasted Islam with Europe in terms of modern social development. He believed that a transition towards modernity and a capitalistic economy required a ascetic form of religion, rational laws, free labor, and growth of cities, but he regarded Islam as a mosaic of tribes and groups never cohering into a proper social system. Karl Marx was another one of the founding fathers of modern sociology, who stated that a society is propelled to development with class struggle and progresses through a series of stages that is dominated by a particular social class. Although both authors present a different view on modern sociology, both these authors believe that the rest did not meet the preconditions of being modern, progressive, dynamic, and capitalist for capital accumulation and growth. Western progress, civilization, rationality, and development was entirely based upon the rest being a mirror image of the West. While the concept differentiates the two cultures, it also helps the West construct and recognize its own identity. Like as a newborn recognizes itself with the help of a mirror, the West used the rest as a mirror image and understood its own identity. It identifies itself as everything which the rest is not. So the West regards itself as civilized, rational, and all the obverse attributes of the rest. The West could not have recognized and represented itself as a summit of human history. West understood that it stood for civilization, refinement, modernity, and development, while the rest was the dark side, forgotten, repressed, and denied, and was the reverse image of modernity and enlightenment.